In the shadow of towering men and mighty monarchs, the women of the Tudor dynasty carved their own indelible marks on history. From the strategic brilliance of Elizabeth I to the quiet strength of Anne Boleyn, these women were not mere footnotes in the story of England. They were architects of its fate. With power, intellect, and determination, they navigated the turbulent courts, shaped religious revolutions, and influenced art and culture in ways that still resonate today. They were queens, wives, mothers, and daughters, each playing a unique role in the dynasty's rise and fall. Their stories are filled with ambition, tragedy, resilience, and above all, an unwavering ability to survive and thrive in a world dominated by men. The Tudor women, often overshadowed by their more famous male counterparts, were the unsung heroines whose actions paved the way for generations to come. As we delve into the lives of these extraordinary women, we uncover a legacy of strength and power that has been too long hidden in the pages of history. From their behind-the-scenes influence to their public roles, these women were the true forces that shaped the course of the Tudor dynasty, and ultimately the future of England. The Tudor dynasty, reigning from 1485 to 1603, marks one of the most transformative periods in English history. Rising from the embers of civil war, the Tudors brought a new era of monarchy that shaped the cultural, political, and religious trajectory of the kingdom. The age is typically defined by the dominance of strong monarchs. Henry VIII's ruthless authority, Edward VI's fragile reign, Mary I's tumultuous religious policies, and Elizabeth I's long and powerful rule. However, what is often overshadowed by these towering male figures is the immense, multifaceted power wielded by the women of the Tudor era. These women operated in a deeply patriarchal society where obedience, domesticity, and silence were idealized feminine virtues. Yet many Tudor women, whether queens, princesses, noblewomen, or even widowed mothers, managed to navigate the restrictive structures of their time and emerge as influential architects of power, policy, and cultural legacy. The Tudor period was rigidly patriarchal, governed by the belief in male superiority both in private life and public leadership. The law, the church, and social customs all reinforced the notion that women were intellectually and physically inferior to men. Women were considered the property of their fathers until marriage, at which point they became the property of their husbands. Their primary roles were to bear children, manage households, and support their husbands. Education for women, especially noblewomen, existed but was tailored to prepare them for these domestic roles. A woman in power was seen as an aberration, a threat to natural order, and often faced heightened scrutiny and criticism. Despite this, the Tudor age produced some of the most powerful and politically adept women in European history. Margaret Beaufort, the mother of Henry VII, stands as a remarkable symbol of female political agency in the earliest days of the Tudor dynasty. Her life exemplifies how a woman could exert immense influence without ever wearing a crown. Born in 1443 into the powerful Beaufort family, Margaret was a descendant of John of Gaunt, son of Edward III, giving her a tenuous but legitimate claim to the English throne. At the age of 12, she was married to Edmund Tudor, a man more than twice her age. Her marriage, arranged for dynastic advantage, soon turned tragic. Edmund died while she was pregnant, leaving her a widowed mother at 13. The birth of her son, Henry Tudor, was both a medical and political miracle. The labor was so traumatic that she never bore another child, yet Henry's survival would prove pivotal in England's future. Margaret, recognizing the perilous circumstances of the Wars of the Roses, spent the next decades navigating a violent political landscape to protect her son's claim. While Henry lived in exile, Margaret remained in England, forging alliances, conspiring discreetly, and enduring marriages of convenience that allowed her to stay close to the court without arousing suspicion. Her final marriage to Thomas Stanley, a powerful nobleman, proved instrumental. Stanley's timely intervention on Henry's behalf at the Battle of Bosworth in 1485 enabled Henry to seize the crown and become Henry VII, the first Tudor king. Margaret's influence didn't wane after her son became king, it increased. Though she was never officially queen, she adopted the title My Lady the King's Mother, ranking herself just beneath the monarch. Her authority at court was unprecedented for a woman not ruling in her own right. She had her own household, financial independence, and political agency. Henry VII trusted her implicitly, often seeking her counsel and relying on her judgment. Her role in court was not merely ceremonial. She was involved in matters of state, court appointments, and even the arrangements of key marriages, including those of her grandchildren. Beyond politics, Margaret Beaufort made enduring contributions to religion and education, aligning herself with the intellectual and spiritual movements of her time. A deeply pious woman, she patronized churches and religious institutions. She funded the rebuilding of several churches and supported religious scholars. But perhaps her most lasting contribution lies in academia. She was instrumental in the founding of Christ's College and St. John's College at Cambridge. Through these endowments, she helped shape the intellectual framework of the English Renaissance and enabled the education of generations of scholars. Margaret's legacy is particularly profound when viewed in light of the limited roles typically afforded to women in her era. She wielded soft power masterfully, working through others, leveraging her position as mother to the king, and employing her intellect, faith, and social maneuvering to carve out a space of influence rarely available to women. She wasn't a monarch, but she acted with the dignity and discretion of one. Her story sets the tone for the many Tudor women who followed: queens who ruled, wives who influenced policy, and noblewomen who shaped the cultural landscape. The Tudor story is not solely the tale of kings and wars, but a rich tapestry woven with the ambition, resilience, and strategic brilliance of women like Margaret Beaufort. As we delve deeper into the Tudor world, her role as the founding matriarch serves as a beacon, illuminating how women, though denied overt political power, could command it in subtle, yet significant ways. She was not the last Tudor woman to wield such influence, but she was the first to prove that feminine power could shape the future of a nation. Elizabeth of York and Catherine of Aragon, though very different in temperament and historical circumstances, were both pivotal figures in the Tudor dynasty. Elizabeth was the silent architect of peace at the dawn of the Tudor age, while Catherine was a fiery queen whose resistance to annulment helped ignite one of the greatest religious upheavals in English history. Together, their lives reflect the multifaceted roles royal women played, not merely as consorts but as shapers of dynasties, symbols of unity, and custodians of political power cloaked in feminine restraint or resilience. Elizabeth of York is often remembered more for what she symbolized than for what she said or did, and that in itself is telling. Born in 1466 to King Edward IV and Elizabeth Woodville, she was the eldest daughter of the House of York, which had claimed the throne during the Wars of the Roses. Her early years were marred by political uncertainty. After her father's death, her family fell from grace as her uncle, Richard III, usurped the throne and declared Elizabeth and her siblings illegitimate. Her two younger brothers, Edward V and Richard of Shrewsbury, vanished mysteriously in the Tower of London, likely murdered, leaving Elizabeth a princess without a crown but still an asset of enormous political value. When Henry Tudor defeated Richard III at the Battle of Bosworth in 1485 and became Henry VII, he promised to unite the warring houses of Lancaster and York by marrying Elizabeth. This marriage wasn't merely romantic or dynastic, it was symbolic. It marked the formal end of decades of civil war and the beginning of a new royal era. The Tudor rose, blending the red rose of Lancaster with the white rose of York, became a powerful emblem of unity, and Elizabeth was its human embodiment. Through her marriage, Henry VII strengthened his tenuous claim to the throne by aligning with Yorkist blood. Their union was carefully orchestrated to soothe public fears of further conflict and to create an appearance of legitimacy and harmony. Despite her lack of political involvement on the surface, Elizabeth's presence provided the quiet foundation for the new Tudor monarchy. She was the mother of Henry VIII and grandmother to Edward VI, Mary I, and Elizabeth I. Her demeanor, calm, composed, and reserved, reflected the kind of queen consort idealized by a kingdom desperate for stability. While she did not openly intervene in political matters, her grace and intelligence helped shape the court's atmosphere. She presided over royal ceremonies, offered patronage to charitable causes, and took a strong interest in her children's upbringing. Her gentleness was seen as a counterbalance to Henry VII's often suspicious and controlling rule. Elizabeth also played a subtle but essential role in diplomacy. Royal marriages were not only familial arrangements but political tools, and Elizabeth's demeanor and background lent the Tudor dynasty a respectable lineage that enhanced its standing across European courts. As mother to the heir and symbol of reconciliation, she was well respected by foreign dignitaries and allies. She bore Henry 7 children, though only 4 survived infancy, including the future Henry VIII and Margaret Tudor, who would become Queen of Scotland and grandmother to James VI of Scotland and I of England. Yet, despite her symbolic power and quiet influence, Elizabeth's life was tinged with tragedy. The loss of her sons, including Prince Arthur, and the political stresses of court life must have taken a toll. Her death in 1503 at the age of 37, following complications from childbirth, deeply affected the king and the court. She died giving birth to a daughter, who also died shortly after. Henry VII reportedly mourned her sincerely, retreating from court life and dressing in mourning for an extended period. Her legacy endured not through bold declarations or fiery resistance, but through quiet endurance, familial unity, and the stabilization of a kingdom on the brink of chaos. If Elizabeth of York was the quiet strength behind the throne, Catherine of Aragon was the steadfast warrior queen who defended her marriage, her faith, and her daughter with fierce determination. Born in 1485, the youngest daughter of Spain's Catholic monarchs, Ferdinand II of Aragon and Isabella I of Castile, Catherine was bred for queenship. Highly educated, fluent in Latin, and devoutly Catholic, she was sent to England at age 16 to marry Arthur, Prince of Wales, heir to the English throne. Their marriage was brief. Arthur died just 5 months later, leaving Catherine widowed and in a precarious position. Her fate in England hung in the balance for years, as political negotiations ensued over whether she should return to Spain or be married to Arthur's younger brother, Henry. When Henry VIII ascended the throne in 1509, the long-delayed union finally took place. At 18, Catherine became queen consort, and for a time, the couple appeared genuinely affectionate and harmonious. Catherine took her role seriously, embodying the ideal queen, pious, gracious, and politically astute. She acted as regent in Henry's absence during a military campaign in France and presided over a key victory in the Battle of Flodden in 1513, where English forces defeated a Scottish invasion. Her leadership and composure during this time cemented her popularity. Catherine was not merely decorative. She was politically active and deeply involved in courtly affairs. She advised Henry, corresponded with her powerful relatives in Spain, and advocated for the Spanish alliance in English foreign policy. As queen, she supported education and the arts, and she was a known patron of Erasmus and Thomas More. Her household became a center of intellectual exchange. She also maintained a deep sense of religious devotion and promoted reforms within the church aimed at improving moral conduct. Yet her most defining struggle came not in courtly achievements, but in her defense of her marriage. After years of trying to produce a male heir, Catherine had borne several children, but only one, Princess Mary, survived infancy. Henry, obsessed with securing the Tudor line and increasingly infatuated with Anne Boleyn, began to seek an annulment, claiming that his marriage to his brother's widow was invalid in the eyes of God. Catherine, drawing on her formidable will and religious conviction, refused to accept this premise. She swore that her marriage to Arthur had never been consummated, and that her marriage to Henry was legitimate in both secular and divine law. Her refusal to step aside gracefully placed her in direct opposition to the king, triggering what became the English Reformation. The Pope refused to grant Henry an annulment, and in retaliation, Henry broke from the Roman Catholic Church, establishing the Church of England with himself at its head. Though this move was fundamentally about royal authority and succession, Catherine's unwavering stance and international support, especially from her nephew, Emperor Charles V, helped delay the split for years. Her resistance became a symbol of loyalty, dignity, and defiance. In the years following her formal dismissal from court, Catherine lived in increasingly isolated conditions. She was stripped of her title as queen, separated from her daughter Mary, and denied visits from close allies. Yet she never recanted her claim to be Henry's true wife and queen. She signed her letters with the title Queen of England until her death in 1536. Her courage and humility earned her a martyr-like status, especially among Catholics in England and abroad. Even Protestants respected her integrity and devotion. Her daughter Mary would later draw heavily on Catherine's image when asserting her own right to rule. Catherine's legacy extends beyond the personal. She helped shape Tudor politics, influenced religious debates, and became a figurehead in the clash between monarchical authority and papal power. She represented the last bridge to Catholic Spain, and her fall signaled a permanent shift in English religious life. She was also a vital figure in redefining female queenship, not through submission, but through principled resistance. Her life story resonates through centuries as a testament to dignity in adversity, making her not just a historical figure, but an enduring symbol of moral conviction and maternal sacrifice. Together, Elizabeth of York and Catherine of Aragon highlight the vast spectrum of feminine power in the Tudor court. Elizabeth wielded her influence quietly, ensuring the survival and stability of the dynasty through grace and diplomacy. Catherine, on the other hand, met challenge with confrontation, defending her crown and her faith against even the most overwhelming odds. In different ways, each woman proved that power could be exercised with both restraint and resilience, laying the foundation for the even more dramatic female rulers yet to come. Their stories reveal not only the possibilities for women in a patriarchal society, but also the immense strength required to shape history while being shaped by it. Anne Boleyn's life is one of the most fascinating and dramatic stories in English history, a tale of ambition, love, betrayal, and political upheaval. Though she reigned as queen for only a short time, her impact on England was monumental. She was not only the catalyst for Henry VIII's break with the Roman Catholic Church, but also the mother of Elizabeth I, one of England's greatest monarchs. Her rise and fall encapsulate the complex power dynamics of the Tudor court and offer a unique lens through which to explore gender, religion, and politics. Anne Boleyn was more than just a queen consort. She was a woman who changed history. Anne was born around 1501, the daughter of Thomas Boleyn, a prominent courtier and diplomat, and Elizabeth Howard, a noblewoman from one of England's most prestigious families. The Boleyns were ambitious, well-connected, and politically astute. Anne's early education reflected her family's aspirations. She was sent abroad to the Netherlands and later to the court of Margaret of Austria, regent of the Netherlands and one of the most enlightened women of her time. There, Anne received an education in culture, manners, and politics that far exceeded the norm for English girls of her class. She developed a love of music, literature, and religious discussion, skills that would later distinguish her in the English court. From the Netherlands, Anne went to the French court, where she served Queen Claude, wife of Francis I. This period had a profound impact on her intellect and worldview. The French court was a center of art, humanist learning, and early reformist religious thought, and absorbed the elegance, sophistication, and reformist zeal of the French Renaissance. She became fluent in French, developed sharp wit, and cultivated the charming, confident demeanor that would soon make her one of the most captivating women in England. Upon her return to England in the early 1520s, Anne was already a striking figure, educated, stylish, and politically aware. Anne's return to England coincided with a period of instability in Henry VIII's personal life. The king, frustrated by his lack of a male heir and increasingly disillusioned with Catherine of Aragon, noticed Anne at court. Unlike many women of the time, Anne did not immediately yield to his advances. She refused to become his mistress, insisting on marriage if he truly loved her. This refusal turned Henry's infatuation into obsession. Her boldness, intellect, and refusal to conform to the traditional role of a mistress captivated the king and challenged the norms of courtly love and power. As Anne gained Henry's favor, she also gained enemies. Many saw her as ambitious and manipulative, but she was undoubtedly intelligent and politically savvy. Her influence over Henry grew to the point where she became involved in matters of state. More importantly, Anne introduced Henry to the ideas of religious reformers, including William Tyndale and other evangelicals who challenged the authority of the Pope and advocated for a more personal and scripturally based form of Christianity. Anne's own leanings were more evangelical than radical, but she was a significant conduit for new ideas. She gave Henry copies of forbidden texts, including Tyndale's Obedience of a Christian Man, which argued that kings had authority over the church within their own realms. This idea appealed to Henry and laid the ideological groundwork for his eventual break from Rome. Anne's influence was instrumental in the king's decision to seek an annulment of his marriage to Catherine. When the Pope refused, Henry initiated a series of events that led to the English Reformation. He established the Church of England with himself as its supreme head, rejecting the authority of the papacy, and, though controversial, was at the center of this historic shift. In 1533, after years of political maneuvering, Henry secretly married Anne, and she was crowned queen. That same year, she gave birth to a daughter, Elizabeth, not the male heir Henry had hoped for, but a child who would eventually become one of the most powerful and influential monarchs in English history. Anne's queenship was unlike any other. She used her position to support religious reform, patronizing reformist scholars and clergy. She played a significant role in shaping Henry's court and policies, promoting individuals who shared her evangelical views. She was a passionate advocate for education, charity, and religious renewal. However, her position remained precarious. She had promised Henry sons, and when subsequent pregnancies ended in miscarriages or stillbirths, her failure to deliver a male heir became a critical issue. At the same time, court factions hostile to Anne, including supporters of the ousted Catherine and those loyal to Rome, began to work against her. Anne's assertiveness, once admired, now drew criticism. She clashed with powerful figures at court, including Thomas Cromwell, Henry's chief minister. Her outspokenness, intelligence, and direct manner, traits that had once set her apart, became liabilities. In a society that valued female silence and submission, Anne's refusal to conform made her an easy target. The political tide began to turn against her, especially after she suffered another miscarriage in early 1536, believed to have been a boy. That same year, Catherine of Aragon died, removing the last moral obstacle for those who wanted to dispose of Anne. Not long after, Henry turned his attentions to Jane Seymour, one of Anne's ladies-in-waiting. With Cromwell's assistance, a case was constructed to accuse Anne of adultery, incest, and high treason, charges that, even by Tudor standards, were shockingly severe. The evidence was flimsy and likely fabricated, but it served its purpose. Anne was arrested, imprisoned in the Tower of London, and put on trial. Despite maintaining her innocence, she was convicted and sentenced to death. On May 19, 1536, Anne Boleyn was executed by a French swordsman specially brought in for the occasion. An unusual act of mercy that suggests even Henry may have felt conflicted about her death. Anne died with dignity, addressing the crowd with calm and grace. Her final words included a prayer for the king, a reminder of the complex and painful nature of her downfall. She left behind a legacy that would be shaped more by myth and memory than by fact. Anne's legacy is profound. She was the mother of Elizabeth I, whose reign is often considered a golden age of English history. Elizabeth inherited not only Anne's intelligence and determination, but also her understanding of power and image. Though Elizabeth never spoke publicly of her mother, it is clear that Anne's memory influenced the daughter's self-fashioning as a strong and independent monarch. Through Elizabeth, Anne achieved a form of posthumous vindication. In modern times, Anne Boleyn has become a symbol of female agency, resilience, and the perils of navigating a male-dominated world. She is often seen as a feminist icon, not because she openly challenged gender roles in her time, but because her life reflects the limited choices women had and the extraordinary strength it took to assert power within those confines. Her refusal to be a passive consort, her involvement in political and religious change, and her tragic fall all contribute to her enduring appeal. Anne's story has inspired countless biographies, novels, plays, and films. She is portrayed variously as a schemer, a victim, a reformer, and a romantic heroine. Each retelling reflects contemporary attitudes toward women, power, and ambition. The fascination with and lies in her contradictions. She was both admired and reviled, powerful and powerless, triumphant and tragic. Her life raises timeless questions about the role of women in politics, the cost of ambition, and the ways history remembers those who challenge convention. What makes Anne's story especially compelling is the extent to which she shaped events far beyond her own time. Without Anne, there might have been no English Reformation, no Elizabethan age, no Shakespearean drama or British Empire as we know it. She was not merely the consort of a king, she was a catalyst for transformation. Her brief, turbulent life altered the course of English history and opened the door for future queens to wield real power. Anne Boleyn's story is ultimately a story of paradox. A woman who rose higher than any could imagine, only to fall harder than any before her. Yet in her daughter's reign, and in the ongoing fascination with her life, Anne Boleyn's voice still echoes through the centuries. A reminder of the risks and rewards of challenging a world designed to silence women. Jane Seymour, the third wife of Henry VIII, played a quiet yet pivotal role during her short tenure as queen. Unlike her predecessor Anne Boleyn, whose intelligence and ambition had stirred controversy and political upheaval, Jane was seen as the embodiment of traditional femininity, gentle, obedient, and discreet. It was this demeanor that likely attracted Henry after the stormy years with Anne. Jane's most notable achievement was her role in reuniting Henry with his eldest daughter Mary. After the fallout from Henry's marriage to Anne Boleyn and the subsequent break with the Catholic Church, Mary had been declared illegitimate and largely excluded from court life. Jane, understanding the emotional toll this estrangement had on both father and daughter, interceded on Mary's behalf. Though cautious and respectful, her advocacy helped lay the groundwork for Mary's eventual reconciliation with her father, a crucial step toward her later acceptance as a legitimate heir. The crowning moment of Jane's queenship came with the birth of Edward VI in 1537. The birth of a male heir was the culmination of Henry's desperate quest and the primary reason for his previous marital turmoil. Jane's successful delivery of a son secured her place in Tudor history, and Henry declared her his true wife, the one who had finally fulfilled his dynastic ambitions. Tragically, Jane died just 12 days after giving birth, likely from puerperal fever, a common postpartum infection at the time. Her death, though deeply mourned by the court, allowed her to escape the political intrigues and dangers that ensnared other queens. She was idealized by Henry in death, remembered as the perfect queen, meek, virtuous, and above all, the mother of a king. Her image would be held up in contrast to his other wives, especially by those who believed in the virtue of quiet submission. Anne of Cleves, Henry's fourth wife, entered his life through a politically motivated marriage designed to align England with the Protestant German states against Catholic powers like France and Spain. Anne was from the Duchy of Cleves, and her marriage to Henry was arranged by his advisors after they viewed a flattering portrait painted by Hans Holbein. However, upon meeting her in person, Henry was unimpressed, famously describing her as having the appearance of a Flanders mare. Though this judgment was likely exaggerated and fueled by Henry's personal disappointment, it marked the beginning of a short and unusual marriage. Unlike his previous wives, Anne of Cleves was not executed or disgraced. Instead, Henry sought and obtained an annulment on the grounds of non-consummation and a pre-contract she allegedly had with another nobleman. What followed was surprising. Anne accepted the annulment gracefully and was rewarded generously. She was given several estates, including Richmond Palace, and styled as the king's beloved sister. She remained in England for the rest of her life, outliving all of Henry's other wives. She maintained good relations with Henry's children and was frequently present at court celebrations. Her tact, pragmatism, and political intelligence allowed her to escape the dangers that had claimed others. Anne of Cleves stands out as a woman who, despite an inauspicious start, secured independence, wealth, and dignity in a dangerous royal world. Her life after the annulment is a rare example of a woman in Henry's life who emerged unscathed and even content. Catherine Howard, Henry's fifth wife, offers a stark contrast. She was young, vivacious, and barely more than a teenager when she caught the king's attention. A cousin of Anne Boleyn, Catherine was brought to court under the patronage of the powerful Howard family, who hoped her beauty and charm would win the king's favor. Their strategy worked, but only for a brief time. Catherine's youth and flirtatious nature reinvigorated the aging Henry, who showered her with affection and gifts. Yet the marriage was fraught with problems from the start. Catherine lacked the experience and political awareness needed to navigate the complexities of court life. Her past relationships, particularly with Francis Dereham, and later alleged affair with Thomas Culpeper, came back to haunt her. The scandal that erupted in 1541 was catastrophic. Evidence of her indiscretions, whether before or during her marriage, led to her arrest and eventual execution. Catherine's story is one of tragic naivety, compounded by the court's ruthless hunger for power and scandal. She was condemned not just for her behavior, but for defying the ideal of the chaste, obedient wife. Her execution marked the second time Henry had ordered the death of a wife, and further solidified his reputation as a mercurial and dangerous husband. Catherine's downfall serves as a chilling reminder of how little room there was for youthful folly or miscalculation in the Tudor court, especially for women. Catherine Parr, Henry's sixth and final wife, was unlike any of her predecessors. Widowed twice before marrying Henry, she was intelligent, educated, and deeply religious. Catherine brought stability and companionship to Henry in his final years, acting not only as a wife, but also as a nurse and political partner. She was well-versed in theology and had a strong interest in religious reform. Her personal writings, including Lamentation of a Sinner, reflect a distinctly Protestant worldview and position her as one of the earliest female authors in England to publish under her own name. Catherine also played a key role in the education of Henry's children, particularly Elizabeth and Edward. Her influence helped shape their intellectual and religious development, laying the groundwork for their future roles as monarchs. Catherine's intelligence extended to political maneuvering. She carefully navigated the dangerous waters of court politics, especially when conservative factions sought to undermine her due to her reformist beliefs. At one point, Henry signed a warrant for her arrest, but Catherine managed to regain his favor by submitting to his authority and downplaying her religious zeal. Her survival in such a volatile environment is a testament to her wit and prudence. After Henry's death in 1547, Catherine married Thomas Seymour, brother of Jane Seymour, but her final years were marred by scandal and tragedy. Nonetheless, her life represents a rare example of a Tudor queen who wielded influence, published in her own voice, and survived the dangers of the court. She stands as a proto-feminist figure who valued education, faith, and female agency in an age that denied women most forms of power. Mary I, the daughter of Catherine of Aragon and Henry VIII, became the first woman to rule England in her own right. Her childhood was shaped by trauma and political upheaval. Once cherished by her father, she was cast aside when Henry sought to annul his marriage to her mother. Declared illegitimate, removed from court, and forced to serve in the household of her half-sister Elizabeth, Mary's early experiences were filled with humiliation and sorrow. She remained steadfastly loyal to her mother and her Catholic faith, enduring years of emotional abuse and isolation. This deeply affected her personality and later decisions as queen. When she ascended the throne in 1553 after the brief reign of Lady Jane Grey, Mary faced immediate challenges: religious division, political instability, and the expectations placed on a female ruler. Despite these obstacles, her rise to power was met with widespread support, especially from those who hoped she would restore Catholicism. One of her first acts as queen was to reunite England with the Roman Catholic Church, reversing many of the Protestant reforms introduced by her father and brother. Her reign marked a determined effort to return England to the old faith, but it was met with resistance and dissent. Mary's marriage to Philip II of Spain, though politically strategic, was unpopular with the English people. Fears of Spanish domination and the loss of English sovereignty led to uprisings and increased opposition. Furthermore, the union produced no children, dashing hopes for a Catholic succession. Mary's greatest failure, however, came in her attempt to root out Protestantism. Under her reign, hundreds of Protestants were executed for heresy, an event known as the Marian persecutions. These actions earned her the nickname Bloody Mary, a label that has overshadowed much of her reign in historical memory. Yet Mary was not simply a tyrant. Her motivations were rooted in a genuine, if misguided, desire to save her people's souls and restore religious unity. She believed she was acting in the best interest of the kingdom and of Christianity itself. Her policies were severe, but they were also consistent with the era's views on heresy and divine authority. Moreover, her administrative reforms, particularly in financial matters and the navy, laid the groundwork for future stability. Perhaps Mary's most significant contribution to English history was unintentional. In trying to secure a Catholic future, she paved the way for her half-sister Elizabeth to ascend the throne and establish Protestantism as the dominant religion. Mary's reign forced England to confront its religious identity, and her failures made Elizabeth's success more striking by comparison. While Mary is often remembered with disdain, modern scholarship has sought to re-evaluate her legacy, portraying her as a determined, intelligent, and tragic figure. Her reign highlighted the challenges of female monarchy in a patriarchal society and the limits of royal power in a rapidly changing world. Taken together, the lives of Jane Seymour and of Cleves, Catherine Howard, and Catherine Parr provide a mosaic of female experience in the Tudor court, ranging from quiet submission to daring reform, from youthful folly to mature wisdom. Each woman played a role in shaping the course of English history, whether through motherhood, diplomacy, scandal, or scholarship. Similarly, Mary I's turbulent rule offers essential insights into the complexities of power, religion, and female sovereignty in the 16th century. These women, though often overshadowed by Henry VIII and Elizabeth I, were not mere footnotes in Tudor history. They were active participants, influencers, and survivors in an era that rarely gave women space to lead. Through their lives, we gain a deeper understanding of the volatile world of Tudor politics and the quiet, but enduring power of women in shaping a dynasty. Mary I of England, the first queen to rule the country in her own right, lived a life shaped by profound personal trauma, religious conviction, and the intense pressures of a kingdom in religious and political flux. As the daughter of Henry VIII and Catherine of Aragon, Mary was born into privilege and affection. Her early years were marked by the adoration of both her parents, who saw her as a symbol of unity and hope. But that idealized childhood was shattered when her father sought to annul his marriage to Catherine in pursuit of a male heir. The resultant separation from her mother and her forced acknowledgement of her own illegitimacy were not mere political formalities. They cut deeply into her sense of identity and faith. As Henry married Anne Boleyn and ushered in the English Reformation, Mary was relegated from princess to lady, stripped of her royal household, and made to serve in her half-sister Elizabeth's retinue, a humiliation that deeply wounded her spirit. Mary's steadfast loyalty to her mother and to Catholicism became defining aspects of her character. She refused to renounce her legitimacy or accept the spiritual authority of her father as head of the Church of England. Her isolation during these years only strengthened her religious devotion and sense of martyrdom. Despite pressure from her father and his ministers, Mary remained loyal to the Pope and the teachings of the Roman Catholic Church. In doing so, she placed herself at odds with the new religious order, becoming both a symbol of resistance for English Catholics and a potential threat to Protestant rulers. The religious and emotional scars of this period would echo throughout her reign. When Edward VI, Mary's Protestant half-brother, ascended the throne following Henry VIII's death, her position became increasingly precarious. Edward's advisors, eager to ensure the continuation of Protestant reforms, sought to prevent Mary from returning Catholicism to the throne. Their fears led to the attempt to install Lady Jane Grey, Edward's Protestant cousin, as queen upon his death. But this plan underestimated the depth of Mary's support. The people, disillusioned with Edward's harsh religious reforms and still loyal to the memory of Henry's first wife, rallied behind Mary. In a stunning reversal, Jane Grey's 9-day reign was ended by popular acclaim, and Mary was crowned queen in 1553. Her rise to power was both unprecedented and revolutionary. For the first time in English history, a woman ruled the country as queen regnant, not merely as the consort of a king. Yet even in triumph, her challenges were only beginning. Mary's reign was immediately defined by religious restoration. She viewed the Protestant reforms introduced by her father and brother not as theological differences, but as heresy, a mortal threat to the souls of her subjects and the unity of Christendom. She set about re-establishing Catholic worship, reviving papal supremacy, and repealing Protestant legislation. For Mary, this was not only a political mission but a deeply personal and spiritual one. She believed that her divine duty as monarch was to guide her people back to the true faith, and she pursued this goal with unrelenting fervor. Her decision to marry Philip II of Spain, son of the powerful Catholic monarch Charles V, was also deeply entwined with her religious and dynastic goals. Philip represented Catholic orthodoxy, political strength, and a potential means of producing a Catholic heir. However, the match was met with intense suspicion and hostility in England. The English people feared becoming a satellite of the Spanish Empire and resented the idea of foreign influence at court. Parliament placed limits on Philip's power in England, denying him any sovereign authority and ensuring that he would not succeed Mary should she die without issue. The marriage proved to be politically disastrous and personally disappointing. Philip spent little time in England, and the union failed to produce an heir despite Mary's multiple false pregnancies. The absence of a child became a haunting symbol of her reign's failure to secure a lasting Catholic legacy. Her increasing physical illness and emotional distress only deepened the public's dissatisfaction. Her efforts to restore Catholicism soon took a darker turn as her government began to target Protestant dissenters. Between 1555 and 1558, nearly 300 men and women were burned at the stake for heresy. These included both prominent clergy and ordinary citizens who refused to recant their Protestant beliefs. The burnings, which became known as the Marian persecutions, would define Mary's historical legacy more than any of her reforms or diplomatic efforts. Though such executions were not uncommon in Europe at the time, the sheer number and the public spectacle of the burnings left a deep psychological scar on the nation. The Protestant reformer John Foxe later immortalized these events in his Acts and Monuments, commonly known as Foxe's Book of Martyrs, casting Mary as a cruel tyrant and fueling the enduring image of Bloody Mary. This reputation has clung to her ever since, often obscuring the complexity of her reign and character. Yet Mary was not a sadist nor a purely authoritarian figure. Her persecution of Protestants, while brutal, was driven by an earnest belief that heresy endangered not only the nation's moral fabric, but its eternal salvation. In her mind, she was saving souls and restoring divine order, not engaging in repression for its own sake. Her actions, though deeply unpopular and morally troubling to modern sensibilities, were consistent with the religious norms of the time. Moreover, many of her other policies, such as her efforts to stabilize the currency, reform the navy, and improve the administration of justice, were prudent and forward-thinking. They reflect a queen who was capable of effective governance and long-term planning, even as her religious zeal compromised her public support. Perhaps one of Mary's most overlooked contributions to English history was her role in shaping the future reign of Elizabeth I. Ironically, the woman who sought to eradicate Protestantism would pave the way for its enduring establishment in England. Mary's failures, her unpopular marriage, her inability to produce an heir, and her religious intolerance created the conditions in which her Protestant half-sister could emerge as a national savior. When Elizabeth ascended the throne in 1558, she inherited a fractured nation. But her relatively moderate religious policies, astute political maneuvering, and cultural flourishing would be seen in stark contrast to the perceived excesses of Mary's rule. It is also worth noting that Mary's reign challenged fundamental assumptions about female monarchy. Before her, no woman had ruled England independently. Her accession set a precedent and forced the political and ecclesiastical institutions of the realm to grapple with the reality of female sovereignty. Though she was often criticized for being overly emotional or governed by her husband's wishes, Mary nevertheless exercised independent authority and made bold, often unpopular decisions based on her convictions. She was not a puppet nor a passive ruler. Her assertiveness helped pave the way for Elizabeth, who would take lessons from her sister's triumphs and failures alike. Mary died in 1558 at the age of 42, possibly from uterine or ovarian cancer. Her death was met with little public mourning. England, weary of religious turmoil and eager for a more stable and hopeful future, quickly transferred its loyalty to Elizabeth. Yet in death, as in life, Mary remained a polarizing figure. To English Protestants, she was a tyrant and fanatic. To Catholics, especially in later centuries, she was a martyr who died trying to restore the true faith. In modern historical analysis, Mary is increasingly seen as a complex and tragic figure, neither a hero nor a villain, but a queen shaped by extraordinary circumstances and deeply held convictions. Her story is one of personal resilience in the face of public rejection, of idealism marred by intolerance, and of a woman whose reign altered the course of history in ways she could never have intended. Though her name became synonymous with bloodshed, her impact extends far beyond the flames of Smithfield. Mary I remains a vital figure in the story of the Tudor Dynasty, not merely as a cautionary tale, but as a woman of intelligence, courage, and unwavering faith who dared to rule in a world that had never before allowed it. Her reign, however flawed, was an essential step in England's path toward religious identity, constitutional monarchy, and the eventual flourishing of a golden age under Elizabeth. Elizabeth I, the last monarch of the Tudor dynasty, emerged as one of the most iconic figures in English history, embodying intelligence, political savvy, and resilience in an era when female authority was consistently questioned and undermined. Her story is one of perseverance through peril, strategic maneuvering in a male-dominated court, and the cultivation of an enduring mythos that blended majesty with mystique. Her reign, spanning 45 years from 1558 to 1603, defined an age and reshaped perceptions of female power, not only within England but across Europe. To understand Elizabeth's extraordinary legacy, one must first consider the trials of her early life and the foundations laid through education and adversity. Born in 1533 to King Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn, Elizabeth's entrance into the world was fraught with political and personal tension. Her mother's controversial marriage to Henry had sparked the English Reformation and the break with Rome. Elizabeth's birth, though celebrated initially, was a disappointment to a king who desperately sought a male heir. When Anne Boleyn was executed on charges of adultery and treason just 3 years later, Elizabeth was declared illegitimate and removed from the line of succession. Her early years were marked by instability, shifting fortunes, and the looming threat of disgrace or death. She was educated under the watchful eye of Lady Margaret Bryan and later placed in the household of Catherine Parr, Henry VIII's final wife. Here she was exposed to reformist ideas and classical humanism, forming the bedrock of her intellectual development. From a young age, Elizabeth demonstrated exceptional intelligence and a fierce commitment to learning. She was fluent in Latin, French, Italian, and later mastered Spanish. Her tutors, including the renowned Roger Ascham and William Grindal, instilled in her a rigorous classical education, placing her far above the scholarly level expected of a woman at that time. Her rhetorical skill, logical reasoning, and eloquence in public speech would later become critical tools in maintaining her authority and managing crises. She grew into a figure of both charm and calculation, aware of how to project strength without overstepping the narrow boundaries placed upon women in power. Elizabeth's path to the throne was littered with peril. During the reign of her half-sister Mary I, Elizabeth was imprisoned in the Tower of London under suspicion of involvement in Protestant plots. The shadow of treason loomed over her, and for a time her life hung in the balance. Yet she emerged from this period unbroken, her composure and diplomacy winning her cautious favor at court. When Mary died in 1558, childless and unpopular, the throne passed to Elizabeth. Her accession was met with national relief and cautious optimism. At just 25 years old, Elizabeth inherited a deeply divided realm, torn by religious strife, financial instability, and international uncertainty. The early years of Elizabeth's reign were consumed with stabilizing her kingdom and asserting her legitimacy. Aware of the skepticism surrounding female monarchy, she quickly set about crafting a public image that would bridge the political gaps of gender, faith, and class. Her famous declaration that she was married to England captured both her defiance of traditional marriage expectations and her determination to present herself as a selfless servant of her people. The image of the Virgin Queen, though rooted in personal choice and political necessity, became a potent symbol of national unity and divine sanction. This myth of virginity was not simply a reflection of personal chastity, but a calculated political tool. In refusing to marry, Elizabeth preserved her autonomy and avoided the pitfalls that had plagued her sister Mary. A foreign husband could provoke xenophobia and threaten English sovereignty. An English husband would create factions and rivalries at court. Instead, Elizabeth used the prospect of marriage as a diplomatic lever, entertaining suitors from France, Spain, and Austria to gain strategic advantage while never committing herself. Her refusal to marry was not merely an emotional decision. It was a shield against the erosion of her authority and a safeguard for her kingdom's independence. Elizabeth's gender, rather than being a disadvantage, became a paradoxical source of strength. She presented herself as a mother to her people, a queen with the heart and stomach of a king, and a ruler whose very difference from her male predecessors gave her a unique spiritual and moral authority. Her speeches often drew upon religious imagery and the language of sacrifice, casting her leadership as both divinely sanctioned and uniquely virtuous. She walked a delicate line between femininity and masculinity, wielding power without threatening the patriarchal norms too overtly. Her reign was marked by a deft balancing act in both domestic and foreign policy. She maintained Protestantism as the state religion, but avoided the kind of persecution that had defined her sister's Catholic reign. The Elizabethan religious settlement, though not entirely satisfying to either Catholic or radical Protestant factions, created a framework of relative tolerance that allowed the kingdom to stabilize. Economically, she reformed the coinage, encouraged trade, and supported private enterprise, laying the groundwork for England's future imperial ambitions. In foreign affairs, Elizabeth navigated an increasingly hostile landscape with strategic brilliance. She avoided costly wars while supporting Protestant causes abroad. Her greatest test came in 1588 with the Spanish Armada. When Philip II of Spain sent his massive fleet to invade England, Elizabeth delivered one of the most iconic speeches in English history at Tilbury, declaring that she had the body of a weak and feeble woman, but the heart and stomach of a king. The defeat of the Armada was not only a military triumph, but a propaganda victory that elevated her to near-mythic status. It confirmed her role as the defender of the realm and the Protestant faith, solidifying her image as England's chosen savior. At court, Elizabeth surrounded herself with a circle of loyal and intelligent advisors, including William Cecil, later Lord Burleigh, Robert Dudley, and Sir Francis Walsingham. These men managed the machinery of government with efficiency, but it was Elizabeth who set the tone and direction. Her ability to manage and manipulate this council, playing rivalries off each other, rewarding loyalty, and punishing betrayal, was central to her long and relatively stable reign. Her relationship with Cecil in particular was one of mutual respect and shared vision. Together, they engineered policies that steered England through crises and positioned it as a growing European power. Elizabeth's bond with Robert Dudley, Earl of Leicester, was more complicated. He was her childhood friend and rumored lover, and their closeness sparked gossip and concern. Yet Elizabeth never allowed this relationship to compromise her political authority. Whether motivated by affection, strategy, or a deep distrust of marriage, she kept Dudley at arm's length while maintaining his favor. Their relationship reflects the complexities of Elizabeth's personal and political worlds, how intertwined and yet carefully separated they had to be. The Virgin Queen also proved to be a generous patron of the arts. Under her reign, English literature and drama flourished. Figures like William Shakespeare, Christopher Marlowe, Edmund Spenser, and Ben Jonson contributed to a cultural golden age that would forever bear her name. The theatres of London came alive with stories that reflected both the grandeur and tensions of Elizabethan society. Poetry and pageantry celebrated the Queen herself, constructing the myth of Gloriana, the radiant embodiment of the nation. Through masque, drama, and portraiture, Elizabeth controlled her image and inspired a collective identity grounded in loyalty, nationalism, and artistic pride. This cultivation of the cult of Gloriana was not merely self-indulgent, but politically essential. In a time when monarchs had no modern media, symbolism was paramount. Elizabeth mastered the use of visual and verbal rhetoric to reinforce her authority. Her elaborate dresses, jewels, and royal progresses projected power and magnificence. Her virginity became not a private matter but a public symbol of incorruptibility. Her gender transformed from vulnerability into a sacred source of strength. Yet behind the myth, Elizabeth remained a ruler beset with dilemmas. Her refusal to name a successor created uncertainty, and her later years saw increasing factionalism at court. The executions of Mary, Queen of Scots, and later of the Earl of Essex revealed the burdens of power and the emotional toll of betrayal. Her decision to execute Mary was especially painful, as it involved sanctioning the death of a fellow anointed monarch. Yet Elizabeth saw it as necessary to safeguard her throne and the Protestant cause. In the final years of her reign, she became more reclusive, haunted by the deaths of close companions and aware of the limitations of aging. Elizabeth died in 1603 at the age of 69, ending the Tudor dynasty. She left behind no direct heir, and the crown passed peacefully to James VI of Scotland, the son of Mary, Queen of Scots. Despite the irony of her throne going to the son of the woman she executed, Elizabeth's legacy remained untarnished. She was buried with her half-sister Mary in Westminster Abbey, a symbolic reunion of two women who had fought on opposite sides of history. Her legacy as a model of female rulership remains profound. Elizabeth proved that a woman could govern not only as capably as a man, but with a distinctive grace, wit, and resilience that challenged the very structures of power. She transformed her gender from a liability into a weapon, crafting a persona that resonated across classes and cultures. Her reign fostered a sense of English identity rooted in sovereignty, culture, and Protestantism, an identity that would carry into the Stuart era and beyond. In the centuries since her death, Elizabeth has been remembered, reimagined, and revered. Historians have debated her policies, her temperament, and her motives, but her impact is undeniable. She was not without flaws. Her indecision, vanity, and occasional cruelty are well documented. But these only underscore the human dimensions of her greatness. She ruled alone without a husband or heir, in a world that insisted she could not. And yet she endured, triumphed, and left a legacy that continues to captivate scholars, artists, and the public alike. Elizabeth I stands as one of the most extraordinary women in history, a queen who turned personal sacrifice into national glory and redefined what it meant to rule. In the grand narrative of the Tudor dynasty, while monarchs like Henry VIII and Elizabeth I dominate the historical stage, a number of women who never sat on a throne played vital roles in shaping the course of the period. These women, though often relegated to the peripheries of formal power, exerted enormous influence through their marriages, networks, political intelligence, and cultural contributions. Some bore royal titles while others built their power from the ground up, yet each played a role in weaving the complex fabric of Tudor society and governance. To understand the full scope of female power in the Tudor era, one must delve into the lives of these lesser-known yet formidable women and the quiet yet strategic influence wielded by those who worked behind the scenes of the glittering court. Mary Tudor, the younger sister of Henry VIII, was a woman who displayed immense courage, personal agency, and diplomatic acumen. Initially married to Louis XII of France as part of a diplomatic alliance, she became Queen of France, albeit briefly due to Louis's death shortly after their union. Her second marriage, however, shocked the political establishment of Europe. Without her brother's approval, Mary wed Charles Brandon, Duke of Suffolk, Henry's close friend and a commoner in royal terms. This marriage, though a scandal at the time, demonstrated Mary's fierce independence and unwillingness to be a pawn in royal diplomacy. Despite the initial fallout, Mary managed to regain her brother's favor and remained a significant presence at the Tudor court. Her children, through Brandon, were closely linked to the royal succession, with her granddaughter Lady Jane Grey briefly ascending the English throne. Mary's bold defiance of political convention and her continued engagement in court politics solidified her as more than just a royal sibling. She was a woman of political consequence in her own right. Margaret Tudor, Mary's elder sister, followed a similarly complex but distinctly Scottish path. Married off to James IV of Scotland in another of Henry VII's strategic dynastic unions, she became Queen of Scots and the mother of James V. Following her husband's death at the Battle of Flodden, Margaret served as regent for their young son. Her position in Scotland was precarious, not least because of the enmity between England and Scotland and the tension within the Scottish nobility. Yet Margaret proved to be a political operator of considerable dexterity. Her second marriage to Archibald Douglas, Earl of Angus, caused strife, and for a time she lost the regency. Nonetheless, her maneuvering laid the groundwork for the eventual unification of the English and Scottish crowns under her great-grandson, James VI of Scotland and I of England. Margaret Tudor's legacy, therefore, is immense. Without her, the Stuart claim to the English throne would not have existed, and the course of British history would have looked markedly different. Another formidable woman of the Tudor age was Elizabeth Talbot, better known as Bess of Hardwick. Unlike the Tudor sisters, Bess did not have royal blood, but she rose through the ranks of society through her intelligence, strategic marriages, and formidable will. Born into modest gentry, she married 4 times, each alliance increasing her wealth and status. Her fourth husband, George Talbot, Earl of Shrewsbury, brought her directly into the sphere of royal intrigue, as he was appointed custodian of Mary, Queen of Scots. Bess managed the household during Mary's captivity and even attempted to arrange a marriage between Mary and her own son, further intertwining herself with the dynastic games of the era. She also became one of the richest women in England, building Hardwick Hall, a symbol of her power and vision. Bess was a patron of the arts and a skilled businesswoman, known for her real estate acumen and architectural projects. Her life stands as a testament to the possibilities of social ascent and influence in a male-dominated society, where she played the game with shrewdness and tenacity. While these noblewomen exercised their power through familial and dynastic connections, a quieter yet deeply strategic form of female influence operated within the royal court itself. The court of the Tudor monarchs was not just a place of lavish entertainments and ostentatious ceremonies. It was a crucible of political maneuvering and intelligence gathering. Women who served as ladies-in-waiting to queens and princesses occupied a unique space in this landscape. They were confidants, companions, and sometimes informants. Because they were constantly in close proximity to the ruling elite, they had access to intimate conversations and private moments, making them valuable assets for anyone seeking influence or information. These court women were often involved in matchmaking, rumor spreading, letter carrying, and even subtle persuasion. Some, like Anne Boleyn during her time in Queen Catherine's household, used their position to build networks and rise in favor. Others became embroiled in scandals or were punished for political missteps, demonstrating the dangerous edge that accompanied such access. However, the successful ones wielded soft power with remarkable sophistication. They shaped opinions, mediated conflicts, and provided emotional support or pressure to the key players of the Tudor stage. Noblewomen, too, played an essential role in maintaining the flow of political communication between regions and between the court and the countryside. They hosted important gatherings, managed estates, and sometimes served as local justices or overseers of parish issues. Their influence often extended beyond the domestic sphere, particularly in matters of marriage alliances, patronage, and succession. Women like Elizabeth Stafford, Duchess of Norfolk, and Margaret Pole, Countess of Salisbury, were integral to the political balance of their time. Margaret Pole, in particular, carried royal Plantagenet blood and posed such a threat to Henry VIII's regime that she was eventually executed, a grim reminder of the latent power women could possess even without holding office. Female writers, poets, and translators also found subtle avenues to influence the court's intellectual climate. The Tudor era, particularly under the patronage of Elizabeth I, saw a flourishing of literature and religious commentary authored by women. A number of noblewomen produced translations of classical texts or devotional literature, both for private circulation and public consumption. These works were not only expressions of piety or knowledge, but also statements of intellectual agency. Catherine Parr, Henry VIII's last queen, published books under her own name, a radical act at the time. Her writings included theological reflections and defenses of female education, advocating for women's right to spiritual and intellectual growth. Such voices contributed to the slow but meaningful expansion of women's roles in religious and scholarly life. Religion itself became a major battleground for female influence in the Tudor period. The English Reformation, while spearheaded by male clergy and kings, saw significant female participation and leadership. Protestant reformers found support among aristocratic women, some of whom protected exiled preachers or disseminated banned texts. The act of reading scripture in English, praying aloud in households, or advocating for reformist policies gave women a measure of theological influence in both public and private realms. Some women acted as intercessors between persecuted religious figures and the authorities, while others embraced martyrdom for their faith, gaining posthumous renown as spiritual heroines. Conversely, the Catholic women of the period, many of whom faced suspicion and surveillance, also played important roles in preserving their faith communities. They hosted secret masses, sheltered priests, and maintained Catholic traditions within their households. This dual narrative of religious women, those advancing reform and those defending the old faith, adds further complexity to the era's gender dynamics. These women were not simply victims of religious shifts. They were active agents in determining how those changes unfolded in their spheres of influence. Taken together, the stories of Tudor women beyond the throne reveal a rich and multifaceted history. From queen's sisters navigating foreign courts, to self-made powerhouses like Bess of Hardwick, from sharp-tongued ladies-in-waiting to quietly devout patrons of religious reform, women shaped the Tudor age in enduring and profound ways. Their power was not always loud or formal, but it was present in nearly every corner of the Tudor world. Understanding their roles allows for a more complete, nuanced portrait of a dynasty too often defined by its kings. In their defiance, their loyalty, their strategy, and even their silence, Tudor women helped steer the fate of a nation, leaving legacies that continue to echo through history. In the intricate tapestry of Tudor England, women played pivotal roles that extended far beyond the confines of domesticity. Their influence permeated the royal court, literature, and the religious transformations that defined the era. Ladies-in-waiting, for instance, were not merely ornamental figures. They were confidantes, strategists, and sometimes even spies. Serving queens like Mary I and Elizabeth I, these women held positions of significant trust and proximity to power. Their roles evolved from mere attendants to influential players in court politics, often acting as intermediaries between the monarch and other courtiers. Their intimate access allowed them to sway decisions, gather intelligence, and sometimes manipulate outcomes to favor their interests or those of their allies. Noblewomen, too, wielded considerable influence in courtly politics. Despite the patriarchal constraints of the time, they navigated the political landscape with acumen, leveraging marriages, patronage, and familial connections to assert their presence. Their involvement was not limited to passive participation. Many actively engaged in political discourse, advised monarchs, and even orchestrated significant events behind the scenes. Their contributions, though often underrepresented in historical accounts, were instrumental in shaping the political dynamics of the Tudor court. The literary realm also witnessed the emergence of female voices that challenged and enriched the cultural milieu. Women like Anne Boleyn, a 16th-century poet, made significant contributions to English literature. Locke was the first English author to publish a sonnet cycle, a meditation of a penitent sinner, which delved into themes of repentance and spiritual introspection. Her work not only showcased her literary prowess, but also reflected the complex interplay between personal faith and artistic expression during the Reformation. The Reformation itself was a period of profound religious upheaval, and women were at its forefront, both as proponents and opponents of change. They played crucial roles in disseminating religious ideas, translating texts, and hosting gatherings that facilitated theological discussions. Some, like an Askew, became martyrs for their Protestant beliefs, enduring persecution and execution for their unwavering faith. Askew's defiance and eloquence during her trials highlighted the courage and conviction of women who challenged the religious orthodoxy of their time. The reigns of Mary I and Elizabeth I further exemplify the intersection of female authority and religious leadership. Mary, a devout Catholic, sought to restore Catholicism in England, leading to the persecution of Protestants and earning her the moniker Bloody Mary. Her actions, while controversial, underscored the complexities of religious governance and the challenges faced by a female monarch in asserting her spiritual and political authority. Elizabeth I, on the other hand, established the Elizabethan religious settlement, which aimed to unify the country under a moderate form of Protestantism. Her reign was marked by a careful balancing act between religious factions, and her role as the supreme governor of the Church of England solidified her position as both a political and spiritual leader. Elizabeth's ability to maintain religious stability and her strategic use of religious symbolism reinforced her authority and left a lasting legacy on the English Church. Beyond the throne, numerous women contributed to the religious discourse of the period. They engaged in theological debates, wrote religious texts, and influenced the spiritual lives of their communities. Their involvement in religious matters, whether through direct action or intellectual contributions, played a significant role in shaping the religious landscape of Tudor England. The Tudor period was marked by the remarkable influence of women across various spheres. Their roles as court insiders, literary figures, and religious participants highlight the multifaceted nature of female agency during this transformative era. Their legacies continue to inform our understanding of gender, power, and religion in early modern England. The Tudor period in England, which spanned from 1485 to 1603, was one of the most dynamic and transformative eras in British history. Women played a significant and often underestimated role in shaping the political, cultural, and social landscape of the time. Their contributions were not only important in the direct sense of their participation in governance and the royal court, but also in the realm of education, the arts, and the transmission of knowledge and culture. Tudor women were often at the forefront of intellectual and artistic developments, using their patronage and influence to shape the cultural fabric of the era. Among the most notable forms of influence was their involvement in the patronage of education and the arts. Women like Elizabeth I and Catherine Parr were key figures in the development of intellectual life, and they used their royal positions to promote the education of both men and women. Catherine Parr, for instance, not only supported the education of her own children, but also played a significant role in the development of humanist thought in England. She was a patron of the Renaissance ideals of education and arts, advocating for the learning of languages and literature, and helped foster a culture of intellectual exchange at court. Similarly, Elizabeth I, whose reign marked the height of the English Renaissance, was deeply involved in the cultivation of the arts. She was an ardent supporter of literature and drama, recognizing the power of the written word in shaping public opinion and reinforcing her political agenda. The flourishing of English drama during her reign, with playwrights like Christopher Marlowe and William Shakespeare, was in no small part due to her active encouragement of these arts. Elizabeth's court became a center for the production of new ideas and artistic expression, and her support helped establish a literary tradition that would influence the development of English literature for centuries to come. Women were also integral to the development of literature and drama during the Tudor period, both as patrons and active participants. While much of the written record from this time has been dominated by male authors, women were instrumental in the creation and dissemination of literature. One notable example is the work of Elizabeth I herself, whose speeches, letters, and poetry not only shaped her image as a ruler, but also contributed to the broader cultural conversation of the time. She was a highly educated woman who wrote in multiple languages and understood the power of the pen in shaping political and social realities. Other women of the time, such as Mary Sidney Herbert, the sister of Sir Philip Sidney, were also influential writers and translators. Mary Sidney, in particular, was known for her translations of the Psalms and other works, which helped to spread humanist ideas in England. Moreover, women's roles as readers, writers, and translators were significant in shaping the intellectual life of Tudor England. The Tudor court, especially under the reign of Elizabeth I, was a hub of scholarly activity, where women were as likely as men to engage in intellectual pursuits. Women's literacy rates were on the rise, particularly among the noble class, and many women took an active part in the translation of important works, especially religious texts. These translations were instrumental in the spread of Protestant ideas during the Reformation and helped solidify the place of English as a language of scholarship. The impact of women on literature, particularly in relation to the early influences on Shakespeare, is a topic that has gained increasing attention in recent years. The theatre during the Tudor period was a space that reflected and reinforced the power dynamics of the era, and women's involvement in it was not just as passive observers. Women patrons, many of whom were royal or noble, often played a key role in the success of theatrical productions, providing both financial support and intellectual engagement. The way in which women shaped the cultural environment of the time had a lasting effect on the development of English drama and literature. Beyond the realm of education and the arts, Tudor women also had an enduring influence on the broader cultural and political landscape. Elizabeth I, in particular, is a symbol of how women could wield power in a patriarchal society. She succeeded in maintaining a stable reign during a time when women were rarely seen as authoritative figures in political life. Her intelligence, political savvy, and ability to navigate the complex dynamics of court politics helped her rule successfully for over 4 decades. The end of the Tudor line, however, marked a significant transition in England's monarchy. The death of Elizabeth I in 1603, with no heirs, brought the Tudor dynasty to a close. The crown passed to James VI of Scotland, who became James I of England, thereby uniting the crowns of England and Scotland. This transition was facilitated by the fact that James was a descendant of Margaret Tudor, the sister of Henry VIII, and thus had a legitimate claim to the throne. This shift marked the beginning of the Stuart dynasty, which would bring with it new political, religious, and cultural challenges for England. Despite the end of the Tudor dynasty, the legacy of Tudor women continued to shape the monarchy and the broader social and political landscape. Tudor women were instrumental in the shaping of the early modern state, influencing everything from governance and diplomacy to culture and religion. The women of the Tudor period, from queens to noblewomen, played pivotal roles in the construction of the political and cultural world in which they lived, and their influence would be felt for generations to come. The role of Tudor women in defining and exercising power is a testament to their resilience, intellect, and determination. While the historical narrative often overlooks their contributions in favor of their male counterparts, the truth is that Tudor women wielded significant power both in private and public spheres. Whether through their patronage of the arts, their roles in the Reformation, or their political maneuvering behind the scenes, they were central figures in the shaping of Tudor England. Their legacies are deeply intertwined with the history of the period, and their influence continues to resonate in modern discussions of gender, power, and authority. The women of the Tudor dynasty were not mere passive participants in the events of their time, but active agents of change and influence. From their roles in education and the arts to their involvement in religious and political affairs, they were integral to the development of the Tudor world. The legacy of these women lives on not only in the historical record, but also in the ways in which their stories continue to inspire discussions of gender and power today. The Tudor women, despite the limitations of their time, exercised power in ways that were both subtle and overt, shaping the course of history in ways that still resonate with us today.